Bill. We've just gotten this information where there's speculation about exactly what this might mean for the president's policies, and we focused on Iran. Are there other places we should also be looking at?
Well, you know, John Bolton obviously heavily involved in many aspects of Trump's foreign policy. He was a big cheerleader for the president to take a tough line against the Venezuelan government led by Nicolas Maduro. He was someone who was not believed to be very supportive or very optimistic of President Trump's outreach to North Korea. Most notably recently when President Trump stepped across the border into North Korea on that historic trip. John Bolton was traveling to Mongolia at the time and tweeted quite a bit about it. So there were a lot of issues where John Bolton, I think, perhaps more than many other advisors in the National Security Cabinet, really stuck to what were his core beliefs about the big global issues out there, whether it's Iran, North Korea, Venezuela. John Bolton has long been skeptical of any talks with Iran, and President Trump has obviously said many times that he's willing to meet with Iran's leaders. So there was no shortage of areas where he disagreed on. And really, I think, as Kevin mentioned earlier, this leaves Secretary of State Michael Pompeo in potentially a very strong position. He's the longest-serving member of the president's national security cabinet. He's the only remaining original member of that cabinet, but there is a lot of speculation about how long he will stick around as well. He has potential political aspirations with the Senate from Kansas. So a pretty dramatic day here, and I think we'll be looking very closely at what may have been the final straw or straws here for John Bolton's time.
Yeah. And Bill, you point to particular places where the president's been very outspoken that he wants to have talks. That's Iran, doesn't have talks yet. North Korea, where he has had some talks, wants to have some more, has been talking about it just recently. Venezuela may be a somewhat different case. It's not clear that there are talks to be had there. But in those two areas, is it more likely now that the president actually will get to sit down at the table with Mr. Rouhani, for example, in Iran and actually try to have a negotiation?
If that's what the president, if that is what the president wants to do, I think Secretary of State Pompeo will help make that happen in a way that perhaps John Bolton wouldn't. I think of any of his traits as Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo has done a pretty remarkable job of making sure there's no daylight between him and the president. And it's clear that there were a number of issues where there was daylight between John Bolton and President Trump, just as there was between President Trump and someone like Jim Mattis, the defense secretary who quit at the end of last year. So Mike Pompeo has done a very good job. If he has differences with the president, he presents them in a very private way that seldom, if ever, leak out. And that's not the case with some of the other people on Trump's national security team who have gone by the wayside the last 2.5 years.